Christoph from Belgium. Am I wrong to assume that Tony Khan may be the reverse Vince McMahon in terms of how they handle talent? Vince was always known for pushing bigger men while smaller guys had a tougher time breaking through. Yet with Tony Khan, it seems quite the opposite. Guys like Cage, Wardlow, Lance Archer, and even Miro never really seem to get a big push, while a guy like Darby is constantly beating men twice his size. Do you think this is a fair statement? I mean, I think in that one respect, yeah, you could say that Tony Khan is like a reverse Vince McMahon. He's like a bizarro Vince McMahon. I also think you just look at the AEW roster and you can see, I mean, the majority of the people on their roster are not physically big people like some of the names that you mentioned. That's why Wardlow and Brian Cage, Lance Archer, they stand out more because they don't have a lot of people on that roster that are as physically big as them. A lot of that roster are smaller, kind of junior heavyweight type of guys. And Vince McMahon has a lot of smaller junior heavyweight type of guys on his roster. But his inclination has always been to push the bigger kind of, muscular guys who look like stars. When you look at them, they just look like a star. They were walking through an airport, you would stop and say, hey, who's that guy? That guy looks like someone special. That guy looks like a wrestler. That guy looks like a bodybuilder. We hear about these directives from time to time that they give to developmental where it's like, well, we're only looking for people from now on who are 6'2", 240 pounds. And usually these edicts don't necessarily stick for too long, but how many times have we read about that over the years? How many times have we heard from people who were there at the time who say, yep, that sort of thing does happen? They have a certain type that they look for. That type does not exist in AEW. Now, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is entirely up to what your personal taste is in pro wrestling. Chelsea in Chesapeake, Virginia. Whenever I hear people talk about TV ratings, I'm not entirely sure how many people a rating corresponds to or what a share is. Can you explain what these things and what the demos mean and why they are so important? The Hollywood Reporter had a great write-up on this a few years ago that I remember I bookmarked it because there's a lot of good information in there. This may have changed since then a little bit, but those Nielsen numbers that we always hear about are based on a sample. No different than a political poll where they survey a small number of people. Usually they do it by phone to see, who they're going to vote for or what a person's stance is on certain, social issues. And then all the cable news channels run with it and you ask yourself, well, how is a poll of 100 people or how is a poll of 500 people or 1,000 people representative of millions of people? It's a sample. Nielsen numbers are based on a sample of 40,000 homes and about 100,000 people that they think best represent the population as a whole. Because not every home in America is a Nielsen home with a little Nielsen box, tracking their viewing habits. When you hear that Monday Night Raw got a 1.7 rating, the rating is a percentage. It measures the portion of a group that is watching that specific show. Maybe it's the overall rating, maybe it's the ever-popular 18 to 49 demo, maybe it's men 18 to 34, or it's women 50 and up. Whatever it may be. 18 to 49 is the main group that advertisers look at, and they set their ad rates accordingly, which is why it's so important to TV networks. So when Raw got a 0.39 rating a few weeks ago in 18 to 49, 0.39 is what they got. That was its lowest 18 to 49 number in the history of the show. This show has been on television since 1993. And a few weeks ago, they got their lowest 18 to 49 demo number ever. 1 point in that demo is, or was, as of a couple of years ago, about 1.28 million people. So if Raw only got an 0.39, that's not even a full point. You can do the math and figure it out. It's never been my best subject. But if a show did a 2.0 rating in 18 to 49, then the number of people in that age range who watch that show would come out to a little over 2.5 million people. The share that you sometimes see listed for a show next to the rating is the percentage of a group of people watching television at that time that are tuned in to a given show. So when Raw had its biggest ratings ever, unopposed to Nitro, which was preempted for the NBA that night, the show did an 8.1 rating. That was in May of 1999. Monday Night Raw did an 8.1. But they also got a 12 share, which is insane. That is absolutely insane. That means that 12% of everybody who was watching television in this country during those hours that night had their television set tuned into wrestling. So I know it's not, even with this explanation, it's not necessarily the easiest stuff to follow, but hopefully that gives you a little more clarity on what some of those terms mean. Lewis from Hinckley, UK. With everyone being released from their Ring of Honor contracts and the company seemingly coming to an end, what do you think of AEW putting on an ECW One Night Stand type of show for ROH? It would be a great send-off to the company that is responsible for some of AEW's top stars like Bryan Danielson and CM Punk, and a great way to introduce other talents like Bandito and Jay Lethal. Maybe that could be the show where we see Danielson against Punk for the first time in AEW. Would love to hear your thoughts. I think it is very premature to even be talking about something like that. First of all, everybody is still under contract. They will not be under contract as of January 1st if their deal expires at the end of this year. Anybody who has a deal that expires after January 1st will stay under contract until about April. So even though, yes, everybody is basically going to be free of their contracts soon, that hasn't happened yet. And even though I look at this as the end, I mean, this is the end of Ring of Honor as we know it. I think the qualifier there is as we know it. The Ring of Honor that you knew and I knew no longer exists. What this new Ring of Honor is going to look like when and if they come back, nobody knows. But they insist that they're coming back in April. So AEW is not going to go out and do some kind of Ring of Honor tribute show when Ring of Honor claims they're still coming back. They just might not be... they're going to be a very different type of company. Whether you believe that or not, we'll have to wait and see. But it would be very, very premature for AEW to even think about doing something like that. Carlos from Gaithersburg, Maryland. I came across an interview where David Benoit talked up his potential ring gear, which had his last name on it. Clearly, he is not responsible for what his father did, but his last name is now infamous in the wrestling world. I can't imagine WWE ever signing David to a contract, but do you envision another promotion like AEW or MLW signing him? Personally, I think it would be a public relations nightmare, especially when you consider the disturbingly huge swath of Chris Benoit fans who seem hell-bent on trying to convince the public that his in-ring achievements are more important than the unforgivable crimes that he later committed. But it's also not David's fault what happened. What say you? It is not David's fault what happened. I feel really badly for him. I do think that the fact that he looks so much like his father is unnerving to a lot of people. But that shouldn't necessarily prevent him from getting a shot. Now, he's not going to get one in WWE, but do I think an MLW or some company could give him an opportunity? I think they could. If he's insistent that he wear, ring tights similar to his dad and he puts the Benoit name on them, if I'm a promoter, I get it. I get it. That would give me pause. I'd say, look, listen, I might be willing to give you a shot here, but maybe ditch the tights and wear something different. Or I don't know. It's not. I can understand where a promoter would be coming from, but I agree. It's not his fault. I think if he really is that serious about wrestling, he just needs to get good at it first. And I haven't kept up with his training, if he is still training or if he slacked off on it and isn't training anymore. He has to put the work in like everybody else and find a school or some person who wants to train him. And if he is at a good enough level to hang with other people who have more experience at this, then I think some company out there at some point should give him a look and give him a chance to get in the ring and see what he can do. Last I heard him in an interview, he didn't sound like he was really actively training full time, and I don't know if he has taken it seriously where he's been training this entire time or not. I have no idea. I know there are people, family members, Hart family members, who I think offered to train him and wanted to see him do well. But I wouldn't sign him just to give him a chance because of what his last name is either. You know, he's got to train like everybody else, and if he's not good enough, then he shouldn't get an opportunity. But if he puts the work in and somebody watches him wrestle and says, holy shit, this kid's got a knack for this, he's pretty good, then yeah, I think at some point somebody ought to give him a look. But I completely understand if a promotion is hesitant to do that, especially if he's insistent on using the Benoit name and dressing up like his dad and wearing the same kind of tights his dad wore. I get it. You know, what he did is, you know, unforgivable, and it's hard to separate that from his wrestling career. I can go back and watch Chris Benoit matches. I have no issue doing that. Some people can't. I totally get it. But that's very different than, you know, him going on television and actively paying tribute to him. It's his dad. He can pay tribute to him in private all he wants to. If you run a wrestling company and have television, is that the sort of thing you want to put in people's heads, though, and remind them of this horrible thing that occurred with this guy all those years ago? So it's a tough situation to be in. It's the son paying for the sins of the father. Jason from Sacramento, in 2003, when Kane unmasked on Raw, was that to pop a rating? If not, why did they unmask him? And do you know what the ratings were for Raw that night? The unmasking was Kane's idea. He has said that he and Vince McMahon were the only two people in favor of doing it. He thought that he had gone as far as he could go in the mask, and it was stifling his creativity. I think they also wanted a big main event because they were in Madison Square Garden that night. So with him wanting to do it, the timing just made sense. And I had to look it up. The show did a 3.9 rating, which actually was considered disappointing for a big episode like that. Imagine a 3.9 being disappointing for Monday Night Raw. That main event popped a 5.0, by the way.